My name is Natalie Jackson, and at 32 years old, I thought I had finally made my parents proud. After years of building my business from nothing, I surprised them with a brand new car worth $40,000. You should have seen their faces, tears streaming down as they hugged me, telling me I was the best daughter they could ask for. 1 week later, while looking for a pen in my dad's office, I discovered their will. As I flipped through the pages, my heart stopped. My name was nowhere to be found. Every single thing they owned would go to my siblings. Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how I confronted them about this betrayal and what I decided to do next. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother Thomas and younger sister Rachel was never easy. From an early age, I noticed the subtle differences in how my parents treated us. While Thomas was the golden boy who could do no wrong and Rachel was the baby who needed protection, I was always expected to be the responsible one who figured things out on my own. When Thomas got a C in math, my parents hired a tutor. When I struggled with the same subject, they told me I just needed to study harder. When Rachel wanted dance lessons, they found the money somehow. When I wanted to join the debate team, they said extracurriculars were expensive luxuries we couldn't afford. Despite this, I loved my parents and understood they were doing their best. My father Harold worked 60 hours a week at his accounting firm, while my mother Evelyn juggled part-time jobs to keep us afloat. We weren't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. Just a typical middle-class family in suburban Pennsylvania. What set me apart from my siblings was my work ethic. By 14, I was babysitting neighborhood kids to earn my own money. At 16, I balanced high school with a weekend job at the local grocery store. Thomas, 2 years older, never worked during high school because my parents wanted him to focus on football. Rachel, 3 years younger, was considered too delicate for after-school jobs. I paid my own way through college with a combination of scholarships, student loans, and working 30 hours a week at a coffee shop. Meanwhile, my parents somehow found the money to cover most of Thomas's expenses at a private university, where he spent more time partying than studying. Rachel attended community college briefly before dropping out to find herself, with my parents supporting her financially through various short-lived passions. After graduating with a marketing degree, I spent 2 years working at an agency, learning everything I could about the business. My boss Amanda was tough but brilliant, and under her guidance, I developed skills that would later prove invaluable. While my colleagues went out drinking after work, I stayed late, volunteered for difficult projects, and saved every penny I could. At 26, I took the biggest risk of my life and started my own marketing agency, Jackson Creative Solutions. The first year was brutal. I worked from my tiny apartment, took on any client willing to pay, and ate ramen noodles more nights than I care to remember. There were moments I seriously considered giving up and begging for my old job back. During this time, Thomas had bounced between 3 different corporate jobs, never lasting more than a year at any of them. My parents always defended him, saying he just hadn't found his passion yet. Rachel had cycled through being a yoga instructor, jewelry maker, and aspiring novelist, with none of these pursuits generating meaningful income. Yet at family gatherings, their minimal accomplishments were celebrated while my growing business was treated as a cute hobby. The second year of my business, I landed a contract with a regional restaurant chain that changed everything. My creative campaign increased their sales by 30%. And word of mouth brought me more clients than I could handle alone. I hired my first employee, then my second and third. By year 3, I had a real office with a team of 5. Through all the struggles and successes, I continued helping my parents financially. When their roof leaked, I paid for the repairs. When their car needed work, I covered the mechanic bill. I sent them money every month to help with their retirement fund, knowing my father had to semi-retire early due to health issues and their savings weren't sufficient. By the time I turned 30, Jackson Creative Solutions had 15 employees and 7-figure annual revenue. I finally bought myself a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. A modest reward for years of sacrifice and hard work. My parents attended the housewarming party, and while they said they were proud, I overheard my mother telling a relative, "We just hope she finds a husband before she gets too set in her ways." That same night, Thomas announced he was thinking of starting his own business, some vague idea about sports consulting. My parents immediately gushed with enthusiasm, telling everyone within earshot how entrepreneurial he had always been. Rachel showed up 3 hours late with her newest boyfriend, but my parents just laughed about her free spirit. Despite these small hurts, I loved my family and wanted to take care of them. As my parents entered their 60s, I became increasingly concerned about their financial situation. My father had to fully retire due to worsening arthritis, and my mother had quit her part-time job to care for him. Their modest pension and Social Security weren't enough to maintain their lifestyle. I increased my monthly contributions to them and called more frequently to check in. During one of these calls, my mother mentioned their car was constantly breaking down and they were spending hundreds on repairs. At 15 years old, their sedan was more trouble than it was worth. But they couldn't afford a replacement. That evening, I sat in my home office looking at my company's latest financial reports. We had just signed 3 major new clients, and my personal income had never been higher. I made a decision that I thought would finally show my parents how much I loved them and appreciated all they had done for me growing up. I decided to buy them a new car, something reliable and comfortable that would last them many years. Little did I know that this generous gift would lead to a discovery that would shatter my perception of my family forever. The process of selecting the perfect car for my parents was something I poured my heart into. I researched safety ratings, reliability statistics, and comfort features that would be ideal for seniors. After narrowing down my options, I visited 5 different dealerships over a weekend, test driving various models and imagining my parents behind the wheel. I finally settled on a Toyota Avalon, a spacious sedan with excellent safety features, comfortable seating, and good fuel economy. The pearl white exterior reminded me of the car my parents had when I was a child, the one my father had been so proud of. I opted for the premium package with heated seats for my father's arthritis, a navigation system since my mother always got lost, and the best warranty available. The dealership experience was exciting. Frank, the salesman, seemed genuinely touched by my story and helped me arrange the perfect surprise. We discussed financing options, though I ultimately decided to pay the $40,000 in full. I wanted my parents to have zero financial worries associated with this gift. "Your parents raised one incredible daughter," Frank said as we finalized the paperwork. This kind of generosity is rare these days. The day of the surprise, I was a bundle of nerves. I had arranged a family dinner at my parents' favorite restaurant, telling them it was to celebrate a big new client. I coordinated with the restaurant manager to park the car directly in front of the entrance with a giant red bow on the hood. When we arrived, my parents didn't notice the car at first. I had invited Thomas and Rachel too, wanting the whole family to witness this moment. As we approached the restaurant entrance, I stopped and handed my father a small gift box containing the keys. "What is this, sweetheart?" he asked, looking confused. "Open it," I encouraged, barely containing my excitement. As he lifted the keys from the box, I pointed to the gleaming new car. "That is for you and Mom. Paid in full, insured for the year. All you need to do is sign the title." The moment of realization on their faces was everything I had hoped for. My mother gasped, hands flying to her mouth. My father stood frozen, keys dangling from his fingers, his eyes widening as he looked back and forth between me and the car. "Natalie," my mother whispered, her voice breaking. "You cannot be serious." "I am absolutely serious," I assured them. "You deserve this. You two have worked so hard your whole lives." What followed was a scene I will cherish forever. My mother broke into tears, pulling me into a tight embrace that nearly knocked me over. My father, who I had seen cry only twice in my life, had tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he joined our hug. "You are the most wonderful daughter parents could ask for," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We don't deserve you, Natalie." My siblings had different reactions. Thomas offered a quick, "That's awesome, sis," with a pat on my back, but I caught the flash of jealousy in his eyes. Rachel made a show of taking photos and saying how amazing it was, though she quickly turned the conversation to her recent decision to explore career opportunities in pottery. The restaurant staff, having been clued into the surprise, brought complimentary champagne to our table. We toasted to family, to generosity, and to new beginnings. Throughout dinner, my parents kept looking out the window at their new car, occasionally squeezing my hand or touching my shoulder as if to reassure themselves this wasn't a dream. After dinner, I drove them home in their new car, explaining all the features and watching their delight as they discovered each one. My father ran his hands over the leather steering wheel like it was made of gold. My mother played with the seat adjustment buttons until she found her perfect position. "This is too much, Natalie," my mother said as we pulled into their driveway. "You work so hard for your money." "And who do you think I learned that from?" I replied. "You and Dad taught me everything I know about work ethic. This is the least I can do." That night, I posted a few photos of the surprise on social media. The response was overwhelming. Friends, colleagues, and clients all commented on how wonderful and generous the gift was. Several people mentioned that it inspired them to do something nice for their own parents. The week that followed was filled with joy. My parents called me daily with updates about their adventures in the new car. They took it to show their friends. Drove to a state park they hadn't visited in years because their old car couldn't make the trip, and even picked up my cousin Abigail from the airport, proudly telling her the car was a gift from me. I felt, perhaps for the first time, truly appreciated by my parents. The way they looked at me had changed somehow. There was a new respect in their eyes, an acknowledgement of the successful woman I had become. After years of feeling overlooked in favor of my siblings, this validation was healing a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged. 7 days after giving them the car, I stopped by their house to help set up the navigation system with all their frequent destinations. My mother had mentioned having trouble programming it, and I wanted to make sure they could fully enjoy all the features of their new vehicle. When I arrived, they were delighted to see me. My mother had baked my favorite chocolate chip cookies, and my father had questions about the satellite radio. We spent an hour going through various features of the car until they felt comfortable with everything. "We need to run to the grocery store," my mother announced after we finished with the car. "Would you mind waiting here? I want to get ingredients for a special dinner to thank you properly." "Of course," I replied. "Take your time. I brought my laptop and can get some work done." "You are always working," my father said with a smile. "Try to relax a little. There are some new magazines on the coffee table." They left in their new car, waving happily as they backed out of the driveway. I settled in the living room with my laptop, but after answering a few emails, I remembered I needed to print a document for them to sign regarding the car insurance. Their printer was in my father's small home office, a converted bedroom they rarely used now that he was retired. That trip to the office would change everything I thought I knew about my family. I entered my father's office, a room I had rarely visited in recent years. It was smaller than I remembered, with the same oak desk he'd had since I was a child, walls lined with accounting reference books he no longer used, and family photos arranged precisely on a side table. His organization habits hadn't changed. Everything had its place, labeled and properly stored. The printer sat in the corner on a small table. I turned it on and waited for it to warm up, noticing it was the same model I had purchased for them 3 years ago. While waiting, I realized I needed paper. The printer tray was empty, so I began looking through the desk drawers for printer paper. The top drawer contained pens, paper clips, and other office supplies, all sorted into plastic organizers. The second drawer held folders with labels like bills, medical, and house. No printer paper. I moved to the filing cabinet beside the desk, stretching to reach the top drawer. As I pulled the drawer open, my elbow knocked against a stack of folders on top of the cabinet. I tried to catch them as they fell, but they scattered across the floor, papers spilling out. Sighing, I knelt down to gather everything up, organizing the papers back into their respective folders. That's when I saw it. A thick manila envelope had fallen behind the cabinet, with the words "Last Will and Testament" printed across the front in my father's neat handwriting. The envelope was unsealed. I knew I should just put it back, but something made me pause. This wasn't an old document. The date on the envelope showed it had been updated just 3 months ago. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I was just making sure everything was properly organized before returning it to its place. I slid the documents out and began to read. The legal language was dense, but the key points were clear. Upon their deaths, my parents' house would go to Thomas. Their retirement accounts and investments would be split 70% to Thomas and 30% to Rachel. The family vacation property, a small cabin at the lake that had been in our family for generations, would go to Rachel. Family heirlooms were specifically designated. My grandmother's jewelry collection to Rachel, my grandfather's watch collection to Thomas, antique furniture divided between them. Page after page detailed assets and their designated inheritors. I kept reading, waiting to see my name, expecting to find what portion had been allocated to me. But as I reached the end of the document, the truth became unavoidable. My name did not appear once in my parents' will. Attached to the will was a letter written by my father, dated the same day as the will update. My hands trembled as I read it. We have given careful consideration to the distribution of our assets. Thomas has struggled financially and will need the security of the house and larger portion of investments. Rachel has never been good with money and needs the passive income from the cabin rentals to supplement her unpredictable earnings. Natalie has proven herself financially successful and responsible. She has her own home and thriving business and does not need additional security from our modest estate. We are confident she will understand this decision. Beside this letter was another document. Their life insurance policy. Again, Thomas and Rachel were listed as beneficiaries with an even 50-50 split. Again, my name was absent. The shock hit me physically. My stomach clenched and my throat tightened. I couldn't catch my breath properly. All these years of supporting them financially, of being the responsible one they could count on, of picking up the slack for my siblings, and this was how they saw me. Not as a daughter equally deserving of their legacy, but as someone who could be excluded because I had worked hard enough to not need them. I found another folder containing previous versions of their will. 5 years ago, when I was still struggling to establish my business, I had been included. The split had been equal among all 3 children. The change had come after my business became successful, after I bought my house, after I had begun helping them financially. My success had not made them proud enough to treat me equally. Instead, it had made me expendable in their estate planning. I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My parents were back. With shaking hands, I returned all the documents to their proper places, making sure everything looked undisturbed. I managed to find printer paper in another cabinet, quickly printed my document, and left the office just as I heard keys in the front door. Found the paper, I called out with forced cheerfulness as they entered carrying grocery bags. "Did you have any trouble?" my father asked, setting down his bags. "No trouble at all," I lied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded when inside I was screaming. My mother began unpacking groceries, chatting about the dinner she planned to make. I watched her movements. This woman who had raised me, who had just been to the store in the car I bought her, planning a dinner to thank me for my generosity, all while having explicitly excluded me from her will. "Actually, I just remembered I have a client emergency," I said, gathering my things. "I need to head back to the office." "But the dinner," my mother protested, looking disappointed. "I'm really sorry. Maybe another time." I couldn't bear to sit across from them, accepting their thanks while knowing what I now knew. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" my father asked, studying my face. "You look pale." "Just work stress," I assured him. "The document I printed is for you to sign when you have time. It's just finalizing the insurance on the car." I hugged them goodbye, the embraces feeling hollow and performative now. As I drove home, tears finally came, blurring the road ahead. I had to pull over twice to compose myself. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in it, had been appended in an instant. By the time I reached my house, one question kept circling in my mind. What was I going to do about this? Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying memories from throughout my life, examining them through this new lens of understanding. The time my parents attended 3 of Thomas's football games in one season but couldn't make it to my debate championship. The Christmas when Rachel received a new laptop for her creative writing while I got a practical briefcase for business meetings. The countless times they had called me for financial help, which I always provided without hesitation. Had I been naive all this time? Had I been so desperate for their approval that I had willingly blinded myself to the truth? The painful reality was taking shape. I was valued for what I could provide, not simply for being their daughter. When morning came, I called into work and spoke with my business partner Marcus. "I need a personal day," I told him, my voice still raw from crying. "Everything okay, Nat?" he asked, concern evident in his tone. "Family stuff," I replied vaguely. "I'll fill you in later." I needed to talk to someone who knew my family dynamics, someone who would be honest with me. I called my best friend Susan and asked if she could meet for coffee. An hour later, we sat at a quiet corner table in our favorite cafe. "You look terrible," Susan said bluntly as she sat down. "What happened?" I recounted the discovery, my voice breaking several times during the story. Susan listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she finally said when I finished. "What do you mean?" I asked. Susan hesitated. "I never wanted to hurt you, but there have been signs for years. Remember your 30th birthday? Your parents left early to help Rachel move into her new apartment, even though she could have waited a day. That was just bad timing," I said automatically. The excuse I had made for them at the time. "Was it?" Susan challenged gently. "What about when Thomas crashed his car last year, and they asked you to help pay for a new one, which he then totaled 3 months later? Or how about when your mom told my mom that your business was doing well, but real success for a woman is family?" Each example was like a fresh cut. Susan had seen what I had refused to acknowledge. "There's more," Susan admitted reluctantly. "At your parents' anniversary party, your Aunt Linda mentioned something about their will. I overheard her asking if you were okay with the arrangements. Your mom just said you were always so understanding about these things. I assumed you knew." "I had no idea," I whispered. "None at all." Back at home, I pulled out my financial records. Over the past 5 years, I had given my parents over $100,000 between monthly support, emergency expenses, and the recent car. During that same period, as far as I knew, neither Thomas nor Rachel had contributed anything meaningful to our parents' financial well-being. I called Marcus again, asking him to come over after work. He arrived with takeout food and a sympathetic ear. Unlike Susan, Marcus had never met my family, giving him a more objective perspective. "You need to confront them," he said after hearing the full story. "Not in anger, but to understand their reasoning and express how this makes you feel." "What if their explanation just hurts me more?" I asked. "Then at least you'll know exactly where you stand," he replied. "Right now, you're making yourself sick with speculation." Over the next few days, I rehearsed what I would say to my parents. I drafted talking points, trying to find words that were assertive without being accusatory. I wanted answers, not a family meltdown. My boyfriend Daniel urged caution and forgiveness when I told him, suggesting that perhaps there was a reasonable explanation. "Even if there is," I told him, "they should have discussed it with me directly, not left me to discover it by accident." Before confronting my parents, I decided to gather more information. I casually called my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, pretending to seek advice about setting up my own will. "I was thinking about how Mom and Dad have theirs arranged," I said carefully. It seemed very thoughtful. "Oh yes," Linda replied enthusiastically. "Harold explained it all at the Labor Day barbecue last year. Very sensible how they're taking care of Thomas and Rachel while acknowledging your success." My heart sank. "Last year? So everyone in the family knows about this arrangement?" "Pretty much," Linda confirmed. "Your father was quite proud of having updated it. Said it was a weight off his mind knowing everything was settled fairly." Fairly. The word echoed in my mind like a mockery. A call to my cousin Abigail revealed more. "I always thought it was strange," she admitted. "Especially since you're the only one who helps them financially." But Uncle Harold said you had agreed it was for the best. I had never agreed to anything. They had made this decision without ever consulting me, then apparently told the extended family I was on board with being excluded. A week after my discovery, I still hadn't confronted my parents directly. The betrayal had affected every aspect of my life. I was distracted at work, missing details I would normally catch immediately. I was short-tempered with Daniel, leading to our first serious argument as a couple. I was skipping meals and then binge-eating junk food late at night. The woman who had built a successful business through discipline and focus was falling apart. Enough, I told myself on day 8. This ends now. I texted my parents, Thomas, and Rachel, inviting them to dinner at my house the following evening. Family meeting, I wrote. Important matters to discuss. Their responses came quickly. My parents were delighted at the invitation. Thomas asked if he could bring his new girlfriend. Rachel wanted to know if it could start later, because she had a pottery class. None of them suspected what was actually on the agenda. I spent the day preparing, not just the meal but myself. This confrontation would change my family dynamic forever, for better or worse. As I chopped vegetables for the salad, I made a promise to myself. Whatever happened, I would emerge from this with my self-respect intact. I spent hours preparing dinner, channeling my anxiety into cooking. By 6, my dining room table was set with the good china, candles were lit, and the aroma of roast chicken filled the house. I wanted everything to be perfect, a stark contrast to the difficult conversation ahead. My parents arrived first, walking in with bright smiles and a bottle of wine. My mother hugged me tightly. "This is such a lovely surprise," she said. "A family dinner for no reason at all." If only she knew. Thomas arrived next with his girlfriend Amber, a woman he had been dating for just 3 weeks, but was already calling the one. Rachel came last, 40 minutes late, offering no apology for her tardiness. We gathered around the table, my family laughing and talking while I maintained a tight smile. My father raised his glass in a toast to Natalie, always bringing the family together. The irony was almost unbearable. Throughout the main course, I let the conversation flow naturally. My parents talked about their new car, how they had already taken it on a day trip to the coast. Thomas boasted about a potential job opportunity. Rachel described her latest artistic inspiration. I remained mostly silent, nodding at appropriate moments while gathering my courage. As I served dessert, I finally steered the conversation toward my intended topic. "I've been thinking about the future lately," I began carefully. "About planning and security. That's my financially savvy daughter," my father said proudly. "Always thinking ahead." "Yes," I continued, my heart pounding. "It got me wondering about your plans. About your will, specifically." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. My father's smile froze. My mother's hand jerked, spilling her wine. Thomas and Rachel exchanged confused glances. "What brings this up?" my father asked, his voice carefully neutral. I took a deep breath. "I found it. Last week. When I was looking for printer paper in your office. I saw the will and I read it." Silence descended on the table. My father's face flushed red, while my mother suddenly became very interested in her napkin. "You went through my private papers?" my father finally said, his tone shifting from shocked to indignant. "It was an accident," I replied evenly. "But that's hardly the point, is it? The point is that I discovered you've cut me out completely. Not a penny, not a memento, nothing. And apparently, I'm the only one who didn't know about it." Rachel had the decency to look uncomfortable. Thomas was suddenly very attentive to his dessert. "Natalie," my mother began in her placating voice, "these things are complicated." "Then explain it to me," I challenged. "Explain why my name doesn't appear once in your will. Explain why every member of our extended family knew about this except me." My father cleared his throat. "You need to understand our reasoning. Thomas and Rachel need the financial security. You don't. You have a successful business, a beautiful home. You've made it. So I'm being punished for my success?" I asked incredulously. "Not punished," he corrected quickly. "We just made a practical decision about where our limited assets would do the most good." "And you didn't think this was something you should discuss with me?" You made this decision, told the entire family, and deliberately kept me in the dark. My mother reached for my hand. But I pulled away. Sweetheart, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. We knew you'd understand once we explained. Understand what? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. That I mean less to you because I worked hard? That everything I've achieved somehow makes me less deserving of being treated equally with my siblings. Thomas finally spoke up. Come on, Nat. Don't be so materialistic. It's just stuff. I turned to him, anger flaring. Easy for you to say when you're getting the house. And it's not about the assets. It's about what this represents. It's about being excluded, being treated as less than, being taken for granted. You're being selfish, my father said, his own temper rising. After everything we've done for you. That broke something in me. Everything you've done for me? Let's talk about everything I've done for you. I laid it all out, every dollar I had given them over the years. Every time I had stepped in to solve their financial problems while my siblings contributed nothing. I told them about the promotions I had worked through to help when Thomas needed bail money after a DUI. The vacation I had canceled when their furnace broke in the middle of winter. I have supported this family financially for years, I concluded. I just bought you a $40,000 car. And your response is to exclude me from your will because I don't need anything from you? When was the last time either of you needed anything from me and I didn't provide it immediately? My revelations about the extent of my financial support clearly surprised my siblings. Rachel looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know you were giving them that much, she said quietly. My father waved his hand dismissively. We never asked you for all that. You offered. Because that's what family does, I responded. They support each other. They don't keep score. Which is exactly why you shouldn't be keeping score now, my mother countered. If you gave without expectation, why are you so upset about the will? Because it's not about money, I exclaimed, frustration boiling over. It's about being valued equally as your child. It's about not being taken for granted and excluded from family decisions. You should be grateful you're self-sufficient. My father said coldly. Instead of complaining about what you don't get. His words hit me like a physical blow. Grateful? For working myself to exhaustion while watching you bend over backwards to help Thomas and Rachel? For being the only reliable financial support you have while being written out of your will? We never asked you to be successful, my father said, the words hanging in the air like poison. The room fell silent. Even Thomas and Rachel seemed stunned by the statement. Dad. Rachel began tentatively. That was harsh. But the damage was done. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking. I think you should all leave now, I said quietly. Natalie, please. My mother began, tears in her eyes. Your father didn't mean that. Yes, he did, I replied. And that's the problem. In your eyes, my success isn't something to be proud of. It's something that makes me unworthy of equal treatment. Thomas stood up, pulling Amber with him. This is getting out of hand. Maybe we should all cool down and talk another time. There's nothing more to talk about, I said. The will made your position clear. Now I'm making mine clear. Please leave. Rachel approached me, looking genuinely distressed. Nat. I had no idea about all the money you've been giving them. We can fix this. This isn't yours to fix, I told her. This is between me and them. My parents gathered their things in tense silence. At the door, my mother tried once more. We love you, Natalie. Please don't let this come between us. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had excluded me from her legacy, who had kept it secret from me while discussing it with everyone else. You put this between us, I replied. Not me. After they left, I sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and empty chairs. The confrontation had gone both better and worse than I had imagined. Better because I had finally spoken my truth. Worse because their responses had confirmed my worst fears. In their eyes, I was not equal to my siblings. I was just the reliable one, the successful one. The one who didn't need them and therefore could be taken for granted. As I cleared the dishes, a resolve hardened within me. If they saw me only as a source of support rather than a daughter deserving of equal treatment, perhaps it was time to show them exactly what they were losing. The morning after the confrontation, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since discovering the will. The path forward was suddenly obvious. I had been enabling a dysfunctional family dynamic for years, and it was time for that to stop. First, I called Janet, my attorney, and scheduled an emergency meeting. 2 hours later, I sat in her office explaining the situation. Legally speaking, what's the status of the car I gave my parents? I asked after bringing her up to speed. Janet reviewed the documents. The title transfer hasn't been completed yet. Legally, you still own the vehicle. So I could take it back? She nodded. It's still registered in your name. They have no legal claim to it yet. What about the monthly support I've been providing? Any legal obligation to continue that? None whatsoever, Janet confirmed. Those are gifts, not contracted obligations. Armed with this information, I formulated my plan. Part of me felt petty, but a stronger part felt this was necessary. My parents needed to understand that their actions had real consequences. I arranged for a car transporter to meet me at my parents' house the following day. I also drafted an email detailing my decision to cease all financial support, but held off sending it until after retrieving the car. That night, Daniel called to check on me. How did the family dinner go? He asked. I told him everything, including my plan to reclaim the car. Are you sure that's the right move? He asked cautiously. It seems a bit extreme. So was cutting me out of their will after accepting a $40,000 car from me, I replied. I just don't want you to do something you'll regret, he said. I regret not standing up for myself sooner, I told him. This isn't just about the car. It's about setting boundaries. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with the transporter following behind. My stomach was in knots, but my resolve remained firm. This was about self-respect. About refusing to be taken for granted any longer. I rang the doorbell and my mother answered, surprise evident on her face. Natalie, I didn't expect to see you so soon after. She trailed off, noticing the transporter parked on the street. What's going on? I've come for the car, I said simply. Her face paled. What do you mean? I mean I'm taking back the car I gave you. The title was never transferred. It's still legally mine. My father appeared behind her. What is this nonsense? It's not nonsense, I replied calmly. I'm taking back my car. You can't do that, he exclaimed. It was a gift. A gift to parents who value all their children equally, I said. That's not the case here. My mother began to cry. Natalie, please don't do this. We can talk about the will, make changes. It's too late for that, I said. The will just showed me the truth. I've been supporting this family financially for years while being treated as less important than Thomas and Rachel. That ends today. Neighbors were beginning to notice the commotion. Mrs. Keller from across the street had stopped watering her flowers to watch. Mr. Reyes slowed his morning jog to a walk, openly staring. You're making a scene, my father hissed. I'm making a point, I corrected. I need the keys. We won't give them to you, my father said, crossing his arms. This is cruel and unnecessary. I held up my phone. I have the original purchase agreement showing I am the legal owner. I also have my attorney on speed dial. We can involve the police if necessary, but I'd rather not. My mother disappeared inside and returned with the keys, handing them to me with trembling hands. I never thought you could be so heartless, she said through tears. The accusation stung. But I stood my ground. I learned from experts. I signaled to the transporter, who began preparing to load the car. As he worked, I turned back to my parents. I'm also stopping the monthly deposits and any other financial support. You have Thomas and Rachel now. They can help you since they're the ones you've chosen to include in your legacy. We're your parents, my father said, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. You can't just abandon us because of a perceived slight. A perceived slight? I repeated incredulously. You excluded me from your will, kept it secret from me while telling everyone else, then called me selfish for being upset about it. That's not a slight. That's a complete devaluation of me as your daughter. The car was loaded onto the transporter. I handed the driver the keys and he secured the vehicle. I'm not abandoning you, I said, looking at my parents one last time. I'm respecting the choice you already made. You decided I'm not equal to Thomas and Rachel in your eyes. I'm simply adjusting my behavior to match that reality. I walked away as my mother called after me, her pleas fading as I got into my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw my father comforting her on the front step. Neighbors still watching from their yards. The transporter pulled away with their car, now my car again, secured on its bed. The drive home was surreal. Part of me couldn't believe what I had just done. Another part felt liberated, as though I had finally broken free from an unhealthy pattern that had dominated my adult life. When I arrived home, my phone was flooded with text messages. Thomas called me selfish and cruel. Rachel was more measured, asking if we could talk about what had happened. My mother had sent a series of increasingly desperate messages, culminating in, "Please don't do this to us." I silenced my phone and opened my laptop. It was time to complete the process. I sent the email I had drafted, detailing my decision to stop all financial support. I included a spreadsheet showing exactly how much I had contributed over the years, with a note that this support had been given freely, but was no longer appropriate given the circumstances. Next, I called my bank and removed my parents as authorized users on my secondary credit card, which they had used for emergencies. I contacted my accountant to stop the automatic monthly transfers to their account. I changed my will, which had previously left everything equally to Thomas and Rachel, redirecting my assets to several charities instead. These practical steps were necessary, but each one felt like cutting another tie to my family. By evening, I was emotionally exhausted. Daniel came over with dinner, offering silent support as I processed everything. "Do you think I went too far?" I asked him as we sat on my couch. "I think you did what you needed to do," he replied carefully. Sometimes relationships need a seismic shift to reach a healthier place. Or to end entirely, I said quietly. The days that followed brought more messages from my family. My father sent a lengthy email justifying their decisions and expressing disappointment in my disproportionate reaction. My mother called daily, leaving tearful voicemails that became increasingly accusatory. Thomas continued his angry texts, while Rachel made several genuine attempts to mediate. I responded to none of them. I needed space to process my feelings without their influence. The silent treatment wasn't meant as punishment, though they likely perceived it that way. It was self-preservation. 2 weeks after taking back the car, I received a letter from my parents' lawyer requesting the return of the vehicle or financial compensation. Janet responded on my behalf, reiterating that the car was legally mine and no gift had been completed due to the incomplete title transfer. A month into the silence, I learned through Rachel that our parents were struggling financially without my support. Their fixed income barely covered their basic expenses, and some bills were going unpaid. This information was clearly meant to make me feel guilty, but instead it reinforced my decision. They had taken my support for granted while planning to exclude me from their legacy. It was a painful time, but also clarifying. I had built my identity around being the responsible daughter, the successful one, the provider. Without that role, I had to rediscover who I was and what I truly wanted from my relationships. As difficult as it was, I knew I had done the right thing. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I deserved to be valued as an equal member of the family, not just for what I could provide. The car sat in my garage, a symbol of everything that had happened. I considered selling it, but something held me back. Perhaps a part of me hoped for reconciliation, for a future where my parents would understand the hurt they had caused and make genuine amends. Until then, I would continue on my path of self-respect and boundaries, painful though it might be. The first month of separation from my family was the hardest. I had built so much of my identity around being the responsible daughter, the successful one, the provider. Without that role, I felt adrift. There were moments when I nearly gave in to the guilt. Almost called my mother, almost transferred money to their account. But each time, I remembered the will, the secret discussions, the accusation of selfishness when I had given so much. My support system proved invaluable during this time. Susan checked on me daily, sometimes just sending funny memes to make me smile. Marcus took over some of my client meetings when I wasn't emotionally ready to present my best self. Daniel provided a steady, calming presence, never pushing me to reconcile with my family, but never criticizing them either. 3 weeks into the silence, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lewis. Our sessions helped me understand the family dynamics that had led to this point. You were parentified at a young age, she explained during one session. Made responsible for adult concerns while your siblings were allowed to remain children. That pattern continued into adulthood, creating an unhealthy dynamic. But they're my parents, I said. Still struggling with guilt. Shouldn't I help them if I can? Helping is healthy. Self-sacrifice to the point of being taken for granted is not, Dr. Lewis replied. Healthy relationships have reciprocity and respect. Yours had become one-sided. Through therapy, I began to recognize other patterns in my life. How I overperformed at work, often taking on more than my share. How I tended to befriend people who needed my help but offered little in return. How I measured my worth by what I could provide rather than who I was. 3 months passed with no contact from my family. I focused on myself during this time. I took a pottery class, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. I started hiking on weekends, finding peace in nature. I delegated more at work, trusting my team to handle responsibilities I had previously shouldered alone. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I received a text from my mother. I miss you. We made mistakes. Can we talk? It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I waited 2 days before responding, discussing it with Dr. Lewis first. What do you hope to get from reconnecting? She asked. Understanding, I replied after consideration. And respect. Not as the provider, but as their daughter. I finally responded, I miss you too. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm getting there. A week later, Thomas called unexpectedly. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. Nat, I need your help, he began without preamble. I lost my job and I can't make rent. I know things are weird with the family right now, but you're the only one I can ask. The old Natalie would have immediately offered money. The new Natalie took a different approach. I'm sorry to hear about your job, Tom. That must be stressful. I can't give you money. But I can help you update your resume and practice interview skills if you want. His response was telling. Forget it, he snapped before hanging up. The next day, my mother called. Thomas told us you refused to help him, she said, disappointment evident in her voice. I offered to help him find a new job, I replied calmly. I didn't offer money. He needs rent money. Natalie. He could be evicted. I understand that's difficult, I said. But I'm no longer providing financial support to the family. I was clear about that. So you'll let your brother become homeless because of your hurt feelings about the will? She asked incredulously. No, I corrected. He'll potentially become homeless because of his choices and inability to maintain employment. My decision is about establishing healthy boundaries. The conversation ended badly, but it reinforced that I was making the right choice. They still saw me primarily as a financial resource. 6 months after the confrontation, I received information that my parents were struggling significantly. Their car, an old backup they had kept in the garage, needed expensive repairs. Their heating bill was past due. Rachel, who had maintained occasional contact with me, shared this information not as a guilt trip but out of genuine concern. They're too proud to ask you for help again, she said. But things are getting bad. Dad's arthritis medication is expensive, and their insurance doesn't cover all of it. Have they made any changes to their will? I asked. Rachel hesitated. No. Dad says changing it would be giving in to manipulation. That told me everything I needed to know. 8 months into our estrangement, my parents requested a meeting. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I arrived first, selecting a table in the corner for privacy. When they walked in, I was struck by how much older they looked. My father's limp was more pronounced, my mother's hair grayer. They approached tentatively, as if unsure of their welcome. Thank you for meeting us, my father said as they sat down. I'm listening. I replied, neither warm nor cold. My mother reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. We've missed you so much, Natalie. These months without you have been terrible. It's been difficult for me too, I acknowledged. We need to clear the air, my father said. About the will, about everything. What followed was a conversation unlike any we had ever had before. There were moments of tension, of raised voices quickly lowered due to our public setting, of tears from all three of us. But there was also honesty. We did take you for granted, my mother admitted. We knew you would always be there, always help, always succeed. We worried more about Thomas and Rachel because they seemed more fragile. That's not fair to any of us, I pointed out. It set me up to be used and them up to be dependent. My father nodded slowly. I can see that now. We thought we were being practical with the will. We never considered how it would make you feel. Have you changed it? I asked directly. No, he admitted. But not because we don't value you. We just don't know what's right anymore. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I had hoped for. But it was honest. We agreed to continue talking, to work with a family therapist, to try rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. The healing process was slow and sometimes painful. We had 3 sessions with a family therapist before my father stormed out, unwilling to hear how his actions had contributed to the family dysfunction. It took another month before he agreed to return. Gradually, tentatively, we established a new normal. I maintained my financial boundaries, refusing to resume support payments or emergency funding. This was difficult for them to accept, but necessary for our relationship to evolve beyond provider and recipients. 1 year after discovering the will, my parents invited me to dinner at their house. As we ate, my father cleared his throat nervously. We wanted to show you something, he said, producing a document from his pocket. We've updated our will. The new document divided their modest estate equally among all 3 children. It wasn't about the assets themselves, which remained relatively small. It was about the recognition. The statement that I was valued equally as their child. This doesn't mean we expect you to resume financial support, my mother added quickly. We understand now that those things should be separate. It was a meaningful step, though our relationship remained fragile. The damage of decades couldn't be repaired in a single year. But we were trying, all of us, to build something healthier. As for the car, I eventually sold it and used the money to start a scholarship fund for young entrepreneurs. It felt right to transform something that had represented pain into an opportunity for others. The experience changed me profoundly. I learned that self-respect sometimes requires difficult choices. I learned that helping others should come from love, not obligation or habit. Most importantly, I learned that my worth wasn't tied to what I could provide or achieve. Today, my relationship with my family continues to evolve. There are still difficult moments, old patterns that try to reassert themselves. But now I recognize them, and so do they. We are more honest with each other, more respectful of boundaries, more appreciative of each relationship for what it is rather than what it provides. To anyone watching who might see themselves in my story, I encourage you to examine the relationships in your life. Are you valued for who you are or what you provide? Do you maintain boundaries? Or let them be crossed to keep the peace? Sometimes the hardest, but most necessary thing we can do is stand up for our own worth, even when those closest to us fail to see it. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to preserve your self-respect? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more real-life experiences and share with anyone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can give. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in your own.